Mm-hmm.
All right, our guest speaker tonight is a 3A superintendent. His name is Don Potter, and he is superintendent of schools in Neodesha, and he's in his first year of being a superintendent. He's got kind of a unique background, having been in Neodesha in a variety of capacities, but I'm going to let him get into the details of that. So, Don Potter, it's all yours.
All right. Well, thanks for inviting me to be here tonight. I think it's always fun to talk to people who are aspiring to be superintendents or principals or teachers or whatever, just because you can share some of your experiences and some of the things that you've messed up and hopefully help out. But, the history of my career is I graduated from Pittsburgh State. Was actually originally a physical education major, and I had a lot of business classes that when I began my college career, I thought I was wanting to be in some kind of business. So I took all kinds of business courses and had some advice that, you know what, you need to go into education. My former coach, he told me that that's what I needed to do, and luckily I trusted him, but went to and did that, got a physical education major on top of having all of these business courses, and applied for a lot of different things, and Neodesha had a business position open. And I thought, well, I'll try that because I do have the business background, and fortunately Dr. Burke thought that he was willing to take a chance on me a long time ago to teach business. And so I did that, and I had some business. I went back and got my certification over the summer prior to the August taking over students. And so I did that for a year or two and really got into the technology side of things. And so they asked me, well, would you be willing to teach some computers and some web page design, computer application, entrepreneurship, all of those different courses like that? And I said, sure. So I went back again, got my computer studies certification, and finished teaching there. I was there 6 years. And in the meantime, I was getting my master's degree in educational administration from Pittsburgh State, and finished that and took a job at Valley Heights. It's a 2A, 1A size school district, and I took the high school principal position, 7 through 12, I guess. And I did that for 9 years, and a position in administration opened up in Neodesha. Neodesha always was kind of special to me just because it offered me my first position, and it's a great community, great people, great kids, and the whole 9 yards. And so I always look forward, and we got family in the area, so I decided that I would try to get that position as elementary principal, grades 4 through 6. And boy, I was fortunate enough to land that position, and really enjoyed my 2 years. And the superintendency opened up in Neodesha, and I was asked to apply for that, and here I am in my first year as superintendent. But really grateful to Neodesha. They hired me 3 times, and it's been good, and it's nice. The majority of the community members, that's where I have the advantage as a superintendent, is I know a lot of the community members, and a lot of the community members have kids in the schools that I taught when they were in high school. So that has helped me a ton, and dealing with different things throughout the community and community activities. So that's kind of the history.
Where does your predecessor work?
My predecessor, he is the high school principal.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. He is our high school principal. He retired, and this is his last year, which that's been somewhat of it's been an advantage because he's able to help me out in some ways, but it's been a really good relationship so far, for sure.
Okay.
Pretty interesting, though. He was
Yeah.
my boss last year, and I'm his boss this year.
That's unique.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But it's been well. It's been great. It really has been good. Anything else on that, Dr. Burke?
No, that's great. Go ahead and tell us what you want us to know.
Okay. Well, first of all, one thing that I've noticed, and like I said, I was a high school principal in 1A, 2A. And with that being said, as a high school principal at that level, you're involved in a lot of different things. So that was really great for me to gain some experience. And so I go to the 3A level, and I was hired as elementary principal and curriculum and instruction director at the same time, which I had some experience with that. But I think as a 3A superintendent that I've noticed is different than a 1A, 2A superintendent is you're involved in a lot of things, but at the same time, there's people hired to carry out those responsibilities. A 1A, 2A size superintendent deals with all of the transportation. They are the transportation director, so to speak. Whereas in my 3A position, I assist the transportation director with decisions and that kind of stuff that he carries out those duties, which is really nice because there's a lot of other things that can require my attention. Technology is kind of the same way. We have hired a technology director, and this is his third year, and he replaced a very veteran, very innovative technology director, and helping him do some things based on what I knew from before at Neodesha and kind of how things have been, and trying to increase some things has been good too, but helping him with that. And then you add the maintenance. We have a maintenance director and head custodians and all that, just like anybody else would. But I think as a 3A superintendent, you're involved in those things a lot more than maybe you would in the 4A and 5A, 6A level. Whereas maybe in the 1A, 2A level, you are making a lot of those maintenance decisions, and in some cases hiring somebody to come and do that stuff rather than your maintenance people working on them. So I think that's kind of where we're at. But you know, from a 3A perspective, I think that it's really, for me, a good position because you get to dabble in a lot of things. You get to understand a lot of things from people who have been in the position as a maintenance director or technology director and a lot of those things. So I have, in my opinion right now, the best of both worlds. I can learn a lot about different things as it relates to the school business and superintendent. But, you know, I guess, you know, moving on, I think when we look at advice, you know, from a new superintendent, some of these mistakes, as I said, you know, I've probably made, and some that I've been calculated enough that I didn't make. But I wanted to kind of share some things that I think that are important as a new superintendent. And I think what's very, very important, number one on my list, is always be from where you are. And what I mean by that is don't always go into that new position as superintendent or whatever saying, well, back before or in my previous district or whatever, we did it this way. Well, I say that because I think it's important for you to credit the work that has already been done in the current district in which you assume. And I think that's probably in any job, whether it be a principal or superintendent or whatever, and let them know in all of your actions and some of the things that you talk about is that you're willing to be a contributor to that you're willing to add to that. And that, you know, I think mentioning previous districts probably can be a little bit of a turnoff to those who have worked really hard to do or to get where they currently are. So I think you just kind of keep that quiet and add those ideas without saying, well, this is how we did it before and it worked great. Whereas you're just automatically saying that it's not working great now, which it could be. The other thing too is I think that is important is to seek all perspectives. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to give their perspectives. and you guys probably know that, but seek all of them and be an active listener. I think that's important, and in probably not in your first job, but in every year doing those things. But the third thing is model possibility thinking. Try to avoid the either or the win or lose actions. I think we have to look at creative solutions using creative people. And when I say that, I think it's extremely important to, after you've heard those perspectives, you kind of know who those creative people are and use some of those people to create those solutions to what we would consider maybe win-lose situations. So we don't want win-lose actions. We want creative solutions. So I think it's just a different way of thinking, a possibility thinking versus yes or no. And I think that's very important as a superintendent or as a leader. Adopt a value-added perspective. Share the vision of the building on what has already been done. And this kind of goes back to number one. Recognize and celebrate everyone's work, but understand that there's more you want to add to that. I think that's extremely important. Timing. Timing is everything. For changes, you take your first superintendent job, it's probably not a good idea to take a 2-week vacation. Timing. It just, everything's critical. And I think you have to consider that when making a decision, either from a personal standpoint or from a professional standpoint. Certain changes within the district require certain timing for it to happen. I think that's crucial. When we start talking about making changes in your first job as a superintendent, I really believe this, and that this goes back to my principal days as well. Start small and go slow. I think that we have to take some time to build relationships with all of the stakeholders to where they can gain your trust. Too much change too quick can kill ideas. I think I was in my second year as a high school principal, and professional learning communities were really, it was on the, I don't know, I guess it was really hot then. Maybe within its first or second year of really starting to get going. And one of the mistakes that I made is I got really fired up about this. I thought that, and I still believe in it. I think it's awesome. I think it done well. I think it's one of the best things that education has moved to. But I wanted to make all these changes tomorrow. And some of the veteran staff was just not ready for that. And I think that eventually we got it. We got it built and we got it put in. And now if you talk to those people, they wouldn't want it any other way than the way it was built. Obviously, we made changes along the way, but taking their perspectives and using those to come up with those creative solutions was important, and we did that. But I just wanted to go too quickly because I knew how good this could be, and so that's one of my mistakes that I made, and certainly have learned from that. The last thing that, as far as global advice, I guess I should say, is we hear this all the time, but walk your talk. I think that people will trust you if you do that. And, this is one thing that I heard from Dr. Burke a long time ago is under promise and over deliver. I think that's important because if you go around and saying the things that you're going to do and this and that and the other, and you don't do it, your credibility is gone. So I think it's extremely important for you to do that. Any questions about that or those things that I've listed? Help me out here, guys.
What's your relationship with the board president?
Relationship with the board president is very, very, very important, and mine is very good. Thank goodness. I think that that's important, but I think relationship with the board as a whole, I think is extremely important as well. And each one is going to be, I'm finding, obviously different. and how what their interests are and what you are doing to help those interests and that kind of thing are extremely important. But we, as far as the board president is concerned, we try to visit quite frequently. I try to keep him up to date as well as all of the board as much as possible. I send out sometimes 2 times a week, but for sure 1 time a week communication on different happenings and things like that that are going on around the district. And it's always nice to give good news, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I guess some other things too, when we talk about advice as being a superintendent, I did not get, in my opinion, the professional development that I needed as much as I needed on the budget process. Now, as far as looking at knowing all the forms of the budget and all of that, absolutely, I had that down pat. It went through my courses, and I understood all the forms and how it all put together. But I think what's extremely important is talk to a superintendent to understand how different taxes and valuation and all of these different things affect your local community and the budget and how it is created. Because taking a superintendency right now, for me, we had a lot of challenges right off the bat. Fortunately, we were able to gain some valuation, which obviously helped our supplemental general budget and lower our mill levy. And we had a lot of working pieces that were going on at the time that made it somewhat confusing, because you touch one and it messes up the other. So I think that it's important as you move through these courses and talk to as many people as you can about budget and how it affects the community and mill levies, and really understand that, because I'm still learning, and I think that each situation is going to be different. So the more well-versed you are in understanding all of that, you're going to be able to make better decisions for your district, and also be able to talk somewhat intelligent to the board about why the decisions that you're making when you raise the mill levy to 2 mills or decrease it or whatever, but I've been very fortunate in that area that I've been able to lean on people to help me with those kind of things. And that's one of the things about the any questions that you may have at any particular time. There's always people willing to help you with that, and don't ever be afraid to ask those questions. I think that's extremely important. If you don't, then you're doing a disservice to yourself and to your district if you don't ask questions.
So you spent some time talking to Dale and Craig?
Absolutely. And we always, I went up there this year, and he helped us move some things around a little bit to help our mill levy. Not too much. We kind of had it squared away, but yes, I spend a lot of time talking with Dale and Craig, especially when our valuation went up. We have the Enbridge pipeline. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but the Enbridge pipeline come through our district that transports oil from north to south. And our valuation just popped up about $10 million. Well, that's okay, but we have to plan down the road when that valuation tends to boom, plummet. So we have to figure out ways that we can be easy with it and not use it all, but at the same time try to lower our mill levy a little bit. And because right now we're on our LOB, or our supplemental general, we're maxed out at 33%. We passed a resolution to move up to 33%. And one of the reasons we did that is try to lower mill levy a little bit because of our new valuation, and it did. So, but yes, Dr. Burke, I've talked to them quite a bit, and talked to KSB quite a bit, talked to other superintendents quite a bit. So I think that's extremely important.
Yeah, there's kind of an old saying that the community will never remember when you lower it, and they'll never forget that you raised it.
That is correct. That is correct. Can you still see me? I can't see you.
You can't see us?
No, I can't see you now. There we go. I got you back. I got
Okay,
you back.
good.
And you know, and that was critical for me. You know, I did not in my first year want to come in and automatically raise the mill levy because people don't understand. But one of the things that I tried to do very well is communicate in the newspapers, get downtown and communicate with business owners to spread the message about what the whole situation was. I think that's critical. And I go back to the relationships that I had with people prior. I think that really helped me in my first year and going through that whole budget process. So I think it's important to communicate as much as you can and educate people because, you know, a lot of people don't understand how that all works and how their taxes are used and all of those things. And I think it's important to communicate to them as much as you can. Let's see, any questions?
Yeah, questions for Don.
I got a few more things, but nothing much.
Yeah, Don, I was kind of curious, how did you kind of go about meeting all your board members and getting to know them? Did you do that kind of systematically, or did you do kind of a board retreat? What kind of things did you do to get to know all of them?
Well, I think one of the things that I did, and like I said, I'm very fortunate. I knew all of them before I took a job as even the principal in the district. I knew them all because of my previous as a teacher and a coach in the district. So that helped. But I didn't know them at the level that a superintendent is required to. So the first thing that I did was we had a goal setting session. And I think that's one of the things that, in my opinion, that it's extremely important. And I'm a goal guy, you know, I go back to, you know, PLC and establishing goals and those kind of things. But we had a goal setting session. I kind of got an idea of what the board wanted from a district. And more than that too, I realized what they wanted from me as a superintendent and what they wanted me to push for. And I was able to infuse some of my ideas that created their ideas. And I think that that's extremely important. So I got to know them through that quite a bit. You know, we spent 4 or 5 hours going through that and talking about different things in July and where we want the district to go, because I felt like the goal setting session was important. So then I can report back to them, say, okay, we've done this, we've done this, we've done this, we're working on this, and they can see some progress that they want in the district. And I think that has increased our relationship and made it stronger, knowing that we know kind of what each other is wanting and what each other is going to be doing that year. We are going to strengthen that even more this summer. We're going to start a strategic plan, something that we're going to put together and get some community members involved and really start getting down to the nitty-gritty. I mean, in trying to understand where we want our district to be in 5 years, what programs we want to have, that kind of stuff. And so I'm excited about that, and we'll get to know them a lot more through that. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
You bet, you bet.
Okay, other questions?
Okay. Well, Dr. Burke, I appreciate you inviting me. Hopefully that's what you wanted.
Exactly what I want.
Good, good. Well, I can tell you that the superintendency is much different than the principalship. You know, my wife has been a board clerk and a business manager for over 10 years. And one of the things that she said to me when I was applying for the superintendent job, she said, "Now, do you realize this is different than any other job you've ever had?" And she about scared me to death, because what I knew was being in education, being with kids, being doing all those things. And I'm not saying that you can't do those, because we can, but she was absolutely right. It's different than any other job I've ever had. But it's very rewarding. You're able to create some change in the district, not just in the building, which I really, really enjoy.
All right. Cool. Thank you, Don. I appreciate all your wisdom.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the invite, and if there's anything that I can do for any of you or the students going through, please give me an email or a call or anything like that, or any questions that you may have. Feel free to give me a call, and if I don't know the answer, I know where to find it.
Okay. Good answer.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank
See you
you.
later.
Thank you.
All right. Good luck.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Start with good things. Richard, I think I overheard you had a good thing. I'm not sure that I know all the details on it. You have anything that you want to share with the group?
Yeah, our NJRTC cadets came back as national champions from the national championship in Pensacola, Florida.
Wow.
So we are national champions, and we're going to have our national championship assembly tomorrow.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Do you have any kind of personal promotion that occurred recently in your life?
Well, yeah, I did. I took a job. I'm going to be the district director of student activities and athletics.
Wow.
To the district level.
Wow. Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
so cool.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it.
You say that now.
So, yeah, it's been a heck of a year.
If the legislature has its way with this new school finance bill, there won't be any activities involved with high schools again anyway, so it won't matter.
That's right. All right.
Local dollars can't fund that?
Thank you for asking.
Other good things.
Kite's back up.
Yeah, no kidding. That's a great thing.
What happened? What was that?
Kites.
There was a construction accident
Oh.
on the KU campus which shut down the kite and actually the whole KU campus.
Okay, I guess that is good news.
Yes, it is. We even got an apology letter from Dr. Watson.
Well, that's overdue.
For the construction incident or for making us take Kansas assessments?
Amen.
Your choice.
We're getting ready to induct 24 new members tonight into our National Honor Society. That's one of the biggest individual classes that we've had. So we're going to do that tonight and welcome them aboard, and that's a big deal.
That's exciting.
Yes.
Very cool.
That's really good. Hey, I went to the career advisory meetings. Has anybody gone to those yet? By KSDE and KSB, I think. I don't know. I don't even know who was all there, but they're pushing for 17-18 that we have all these advisory pieces in place. I went to a meeting in Clearwater today, really productive. So if you see that come across the agenda, it's worth sending your counselors for sure, and probably yourself. So I just wanted to give a shout out for that. I mean, it sounds like that will be way of life in 17-18.
Yep.
You have to have all these college and career standards in place. They said you had to have 4 specific standards, and I think I read that there was 16 to 18 total. So just wanted to mention that.
All right. Very cool. We had about 10 bankers show up last week at our high school for a virtual groundbreaking, and we're actually opening a charter branch of the Valley State Bank in our high school.
Oh, wow.
So kids can actually get loans. They'll have a branch manager that's an adult that works there, but the kids will actually keep the books and take deposits and all kinds of stuff. It goes right alongside the student-run coffee shop. So every morning kids come to school and they don't have to go to Quick Trip or Starbucks or anything. They can just go right to Stompin' Grounds Coffee Shop in the high school, and then the students volunteer, work the whole thing. They got a $45,000 loan from the Board of Education. They had a great business plan. And this first year it's been open. The bank will open next year. And the bank will even have an ATM.
Wow.
Wow.
So pretty exciting. Let me share with you what we're going to be doing tonight. All right, so we're through good things and the guest speaker and the introductions, of course. Let's get to the case studies that seem to kind of fall in line. It's almost like they're themes. So when we had chapter 3, the Blythefield story, the challenge of changing demographics. Has anybody experienced that kind of thing in their school district, where over time things kind of switched up on you?
Watched it happen to Maze.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when I heard it, when I was reading it.
I kept thinking about Maze every time I read it.
Me too.
Well, it can happen anywhere, but it's important to be aware that you can have your district transformed on you almost overnight. You know, think about what would happen in your district, regardless of where you are. I guess except for Shawnee Mission, although it would have an impact if it was right in the same catchment area as all the different schools that funnel into your high school. If you had a meat packing plant move in that was going to employ 1,000 people, what implications would that have for you? And in terms of a whole different set of, well, first of all, where are they going to live? And the demographics of the parents and the children, and how much more will you have to put into ESOL? What will it do to your free lunch program? What will the ramifications be? Will there be any gang activity? How will the old students, the current students, accept the new students? And if you don't have space for them, what are you going to do? I mean, it can get kind of crazy. So when you think about this particular case study, what advice would you give the superintendent?
I think they have to establish lots of relationships with the like the builders and the businesses in town, so they can kind of get a grip on new housing or new businesses in town. Chamber of Commerce, you know, make those relationships so you can kind of keep your thumb on what's going on in town.
Yeah, great point. Great point. How might you go about trying to pull all those diverse groups together?
Food always works.
Yeah. Okay. Who might you ask for input on how to pull together the leadership of these diverse groups?
I think you can obviously use some of your civic organizations in town, you know, your Lions clubs and your Optimist clubs and your, you know, some of your local, your churches, anybody that's going to have that diverse population together in some way, shape, or form. They might have some ideas on how, you know, at least for their group of people, what do they like, what are their preferences, and try to find a way to kind of meet in the middle and get as many of those different sets of groups together as you can. You know, you're going to be in a lot of, like we talked about before, be in a lot of parades, be in a lot of shows, just make yourself available. I consider our high school to be the flagship of the city, so to speak. So I wouldn't be afraid to host meetings and like Russ says, cookouts or concerts or anything that you can get people in your building first and foremost, just to kind of see what you have going, and they can get a kind of a feel for what they like or what they're looking for, because we're always, on show, so to speak. We're always out recruiting as it is, at least here. And so I think that's important to get people in your building, see what you have to offer, and find ways that you can meet with them and just listen, first and foremost. Listen to their ideas and thoughts.
Yeah, and I would say even taking that idea and creating a citizens advisory panel so that you can have representation from all different locations and have their leadership present to, be able to take information back and dispel myths that might exist in those areas, but have two-way conversations that way as well.
I know that in our district, Dr. Henson, he runs attendance area meetings and makes sure that he goes around and talks about current issues and issues that are facing the district. And he kind of always rotates that around each attendance area. We're currently looking at 6th graders moving to the middle school. So he created a patrons committee with administrators, local business officials, and students and teachers. And we have met 5 times in each attendance area. Provided a survey, and we're just now getting the results back to make a recommendation to Dr. Henson in May. So I think going out and including all your stakeholders, not just the school, but community, business, helps become problem solvers, and they buy off, I think, a little bit easier.
Yes.
So it's getting out.
Yeah, that's really critical. And, just as you all as principals, if you're not careful, you can kind of get strapped to your chair in your office. And I've had several principals who actually set timers on their computer twice a day to do walkthroughs. And every time the alarm went off, within 5 minutes, they were up and out and doing walkthroughs throughout the building, and they'd knock out, 5 or 10 of those and then get back to their office. But, as you know from being a principal, the same thing can happen to you. You can get, all of a sudden, you've been sitting all day, and that's not even healthy.
Yeah.
But if you force yourself to get up and get out, that's good. And it's even kind of a different up and out for a superintendent in that your audience is the whole district, for one thing. And in Shawnee Mission, as Richard was saying, it's gigantic compared to anything we have experienced. So trying to balance all those different audiences and make sure that they feel listened to is absolutely critical. So great ideas. Remind me, what were the 4 factions that had arisen in the district?
Well, they had the rural kind of old guard, which made me laugh when they said that, because I can see the people who graduated from my building, kind of doing that. The people who graduated from here who know how it should be better than anyone else.
Okay, that was one of them.
You had the gated community with young professionals, and then retired folk.
Right, the ones that didn't have any kids in school anymore.
Yes.
Was there a 4th one?
There's a trailer house.
That's right.
Trailer park.
Hispanic.
Yeah.
So what kinds of things do you think the older adults who didn't have any kids, what's in it for them? How could you make it seem to them it was worth their while to invest in schools?
Well, it's for the good of your community, and you have to sell that. You have to get, in my opinion, one of the missing pieces might be the students too, because not only do you invite the community leaders to these meetings, but I'm getting student leaders from these different population groups too. And I think you have to let people see these kids and how talented some of them are, and then you'll get community buy-in. And, community projects come to mind when I think about it. But somehow, some way, you got to get some relationships between these different sets of people. Because if it's just me as a superintendent, for example, trying to sell that point, I won't do it. I've got to have the actual bodies there, helping me on all sides. And I think you can always find 2 or 3 people that have key influence in those different groups that can really help lead that.
Yeah, that's a great point. We used to call it making the investment before you need a return on the investment. So when I was in the Odyssey back in the mid-90s, when most people were still doing dial-up internet, we got one 56K line from an operation out of KU called CanRen. We were able to bring that to the entire district, and then we wrote a grant that allowed us to allow the city library to connect wirelessly to our network, and we bought 8 computers for them. So suddenly the city library had connectivity to the internet and didn't cost them a thing. So then a few years later, when we wanted to have a bond election, we had already created some goodwill. So good chance those people voted yes, and the bond issue did pass.
You know, I think you, excuse me, sorry, I was just trying to think of how you could build relationships with the retirees. And one of the things that I think might be really effective would be like having a Veterans Day celebration and inviting them to the school so that they can actually have a reason to be there. And then you can establish relationships with them. Perhaps some of them would be willing to come in and be volunteers for math, you know, listen to kids read and kind of create that grandma-grandpa liaison atmosphere. It might work for some. I know when we get people in our make no idea what actually takes place until they walk in because they remember school being the way it was when they were in school.
Right. Yeah, great point. Another thing that you can do, depending on how your school district operates, get students out doing community service. You know, there are a lot of older adults who think, boy, those kids are just rotten. All they do is write graffiti on the side of businesses or horse around all night or, you know, break mailboxes or something. And when you can get them out in the community doing good, that creates goodwill as well. So if you were looking at the, I don't want to call them the trailer park people because that connotation is not very positive. Although I lived in a trailer once, so it's not terrible. But we'll call them the lower socioeconomic students. What would their parents want for their kids, do you think?
For us, that's kind of twofold. I mean, you understand what their parents want, but some of the staff, you know, we talked about it last week. The high school staff here is predominantly what you would consider, when I was growing up, white middle class. Education was important. You were going to go to college. You were going to, you know, and with our low socioeconomics, that's not even number 1 or 2 or 3 on their list as far as what are they going to do after high school and go to college. They have more direct needs of how am I going to get to school in the morning? Who's going to take the 3 kids when I'm working 3rd shift job and I've got Billy that's got to take us younger kids? And, you know, so many of my staff want to, they're compassionate, but it's more sympathetic than empathetic. They want to save them, and I don't think that's what they need, and that's not what they want. I mean, you got to find a way to hear their feelings and thoughts, but I don't know. It's kind of slippery slope, I guess, because I think we tend to get caught up and we want to save them instead of educate them. And the hardest point for me is finding ways to educate them, but yet still feel, you know, what they're going through, because their values are not anywhere near similar to what my staff or what you would consider the middle class values are. They are more pressing on, where am I going to eat? Am I going to get, you know, is my kid going to get fed tomorrow? If they're not in school, they don't get fed. There's nobody to watch them. So there's a different set of needs for our low socioeconomic group than I would say our middle class kids.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think what we need to do with those kids is to provide hope.
Amen.
Is to provide an opportunity that gives those kids a vision or a hope that no matter what the circumstances is, they can be successful. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we try to do with our low SES kids is to say, not yet. You're not there, but you can be. And I think that's really important, providing a pathway of hope that where you are today doesn't mean that's where you have to be tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think in previous courses you all have looked at growth mindset, and grit, those kinds of things. Resilience, as we talked about last week.
Yep.
Hope, absolutely significant. Then the one behind the parents behind the gated community. What do we think they want for their kids?
But they talked about wanting more gifted programs, probably advanced placement courses. I mean, I'm just, it doesn't necessarily say all that, but I mean, it did talk about gifted programs, whether it be dual credit, just as many academic opportunities as possible.
Mm-hmm. Now, depending on how big was the high school, did they say?
I think it grew to 8,600.
Yes.
For the
District was 8,600?
District, yeah.
Okay, well, they certainly could have
8,350 was the district.
Okay. Well, they'd have at least one high school. But, it's Texas, so they might only have one high school because it's more important to have a better football team than
huge football stadiums.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they'll have a turf stadium.
Hey, Campus has one of those. Don't get too far ahead of yourself there.
No. Yeah, but that turf stadium in Texas is at all 1 and 2A schools.
Yeah, that's their practice stadium.
And don't go crazy here. I've got to practice artificial turf at my high school as well.
Absolutely. It's nice, by the way.
Well,
yeah, but Kansas doesn't have more spring practice days than the NCAA allows, like Texas.
Well, okay. We've digressed.
Quickly.
All right, so what we're talking about is basically making sure that this high school becomes what we would call a comprehensive high school. If you've got kids who are first generation, maybe going to college or at least post-secondary, then probably an AVID program or something would fit really, really well there. And then, if you've got the ones who want their kids to have some college-bound opportunities while they're in high school, advanced placement, or even international baccalaureate.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, a lot of school districts back in the 90s dropped their shop classes. They dropped their vocational classes. They called them hobby courses. Other places kept those. We kept all ours, so we still have auto shop and CAD and all that kind of stuff. Wood shop. And then all these pathways. Suddenly we have 14 pathways. But when you have those kind of diverse needs, if you can serve those kids and have something for everybody, then you can also make the parents a little happier. Dina, I think you were saying something about maybe getting together what sounded like maybe a diverse advisory committee of parents. Was that the direction you were headed?
It was, yeah. I think that would, be important to, I look at that reconstruction of the school district at the very, very end and how they kept a row in between each group. And we need to bring together and get to know one another.
It would seem to me if you could, find out who the movers and shakers in all 4 groups were and pull them together and have regular meetings with them and the superintendent and maybe some of the other administrators, board members, even some teachers, as long as it didn't get too big, just to make sure people felt like they were being heard. And then when I read this one, it seemed to me that if they were able to pull that group together and then use that group along with the board to fashion a new strategic plan,
right,
that would give everybody input and give direction at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the old guard may not like it very much because it's not school the way we've always had it. What else struck you in this particular case study?
I think they had a significant issue with passing the first bond, maybe not having enough, only knowing what we've read, not realizing that the district was going to outnumber itself before the construction was even complete. So now they've got these great facilities, but they still have overcrowding. And now they can't sell it to do another bond. I mean, that was a big issue.
Yeah, and that trying to plan for the future and then under planning and having to go back too soon is really troubling.
Yeah.
That can really hurt you.
The other thing that stuck out to me, and it's my superintendent, Mr. Hall, and I have talked quite a bit about this because as we had our first class with Dr. Havlicek, we were talking about the presence of a superintendent within the building, but also board members need to be there. And that was a change Mr. Hall here in our district made. We used to have board members in our buildings all the time. And when he came on board, he went about conducting business where he wanted himself to be the advisor to the board, and all communication to the schools would come through him from the board. And so that was totally opposite of what we were learning in that first class. And so I'd asked him about that, and he said that when he came in to our school district, there was a lot of micromanaging taking place, and that board members were trying to get people fired. It was not appropriate. And so he talked to me about that, and that's one of the things I picked up on page 25 here, is that there were 3 particular board members that were really micromanaging and maybe settling things in the bathroom, as you suggested last week.
Yeah. Yeah, they certainly went through a lot of leadership changes too.
Oh, wow, yeah. 5 superintendents, 3 principals in 7 years.
Yeah, and that upsets people. Mm-hmm. You could have reasons for it that made sense to you, but to the general public, it looks like an insurrection.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part of that is people, your constituents, want to trust leadership, and if it's stable, they feel pretty good about it. And when it's not, it makes them uneasy, makes them fearful. Not just the people who work in the buildings, but the people who live in the district. All right, let's move on to case study 4. The politics of school reform. Okay, so on page 32, in the last paragraph, yet a positive working relationship with the school board is ranked as the #1 challenge that superintendents face. This may sound like it'll be news to you, but could be that not every board member is going to be in love with your performance. So to me, this goes back to the importance of building relationships. Have any of you read Man's Search for Meaning? It's a book by Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust. And a lot of what he wrote was about surviving by having hope, by the way. But one of the things he talked about in the book was something he called paradoxical intent. So when you have a board member that you think doesn't care for you and maybe doesn't support you, you may have the feeling that, well, forget them, I'll just focus on the good ones. And looking at paradoxical intent, you may want to, instead of withdrawing, extend and try to get them to know you better and you to get to know them better. Build the relationship. In my first superintendency, my second year, and in my first year, I made a number of mistakes. And my biggest critic at the July board meeting in my second year was named board president. And I was just sick. I just thought, oh my gosh. I mean, it's gone from bad to worse. But I persevered, and I thought, you know, I think I'm doing a good job. I know I've got a heart for this. I'm going to do what I do. And by the end of the year, he said, you know, I had some doubts about you, but I've got to say, you're doing a heck of a job. Now, we got to know each other better. He got to understand me better. I got to understand a little bit more where he was coming from. And my first response was to, you know, I'm going to hide from this guy. I don't want to see him. I don't want to get to know him. So when we talk about paradoxical intent, with our oldest child, my wife and I used to conspire and try to figure out devious ways we could punish her to make her behave correctly. And having read this book, I said to my wife one night, you know, instead of trying to figure out ways to punish her into good behavior, what if we hugged her more and demonstrated appreciation for her more? And it was the opposite of what we wanted to do. It was the opposite of what we thought would work. And it worked. I mean, honestly, it's one of the few times my wife has stepped into the bathroom here to talk to that same daughter I was telling you about. It's one of the few times in my life my wife has said, you're a genius. But it worked. But it was paradoxical intent. Thinking you wanted to do one thing and then doing the exact opposite and having it have the opposite effect that you thought it would have. So that relationship with school board members individually, you can build those. So this dysfunctional team of 8, what do you suppose the superintendent might do besides have his resume updated?
But when I looked at that, I kind of thought that he had a vision. And I think he thought they were with him, and they either didn't really understand or were telling them that, you know, yeah, we agreed, but when it came to really doing it, really didn't have his back necessarily. I think that's kind of when you go back and you look at your vision, your mission, your strategic plan, and, take a step back and take a look at all of those things with them. And hopefully come to a consensus on how to move forward with it.
Yeah, I think you're right on target. When I read this, I was thinking this is a time when maybe a combination of things would be helpful. A board retreat. Let's see if we can all get on the same page. You know, let's see if we can move forward by focusing on what's in the best interest of students. What did you think about the speed of which the superintendent made his personnel decisions? Too fast or too slow?
Pretty quick.
Too fast.
Yeah, and once again, that scares people. Jessica, what did you think about this particular case study?
Well, I thought it was interesting. One of the best pieces of advice I ever received was go slow to go fast. And that's what it made me think was he was ready to go, and not everybody was with him on it. And the other thing that I thought about was I liked the strategy for reducing conflict and increasing staff agreement through the quality circles. And then that led to increased communication and all of the other positive things. So
Great point. At the building level, do all of you have a building leadership team?
Mhm.
Yes.
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 No?
Yes.
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 You all don't have one?
We have one.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, actually, we've moved
I
away.
don't have one in Tribune.
Okay. Have they ever had one out in Tribune? Richard, what were you going to say?
We're really working with Daggett's 4 quadrants and his philosophy of rigor, relevance, and relationship. So we have moved away from having a leadership team with like DC, and now we become more interdisciplinary. And now I run what we call a tribe council, which is open to anyone to come and be a part of what I would normally do with DC. We now have opened it up to anyone in any department to come and participate. And we're going now to more of an interdisciplinary team approach than just having DCs and creating silos
Mm-hmm.
that we've done in the past.
Okay, that sounds good too.
Well, aren't we all going to have BLTs here pretty quickly?
Right.
I don't mean for dinner.
Right.
And DLTs.
Well, you know, it was a good idea before they decided to mandate it. At the superintendent's level, can you see a reason to have something similar?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, after listening to the first 3 superintendents, the main theme is that to talk to each other.
Yeah,
Run things by. Don't try to do it alone.
right.
Cadre. So I see there's real value in, at that level, having a group that you can talk to and ask advice on issues.
It's really hard to collaborate if you don't communicate.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
I have a superintendent's advisory team of teachers that I meet with periodically. And part of the reason is, and no principals are there, it's just over lunch, and it's a sharing of ideas. You know, I'll have some things I want to share out to them, and then they can tell me some things that they want me to hear from the buildings. They can also ask some questions about things. It's amazing what can become truth out of rumors. And if you're not there to clarify, things can get awfully confused very quickly. All right. Anything else on the 4th case study? All right, let's move on. Let's look at what we were. All right, discussion of the video. What did you all think of that?
Well, I'll speak. I loved it because I think one of the biggest things as administrators we get afraid of is to confront, and you have to be able to confront some issues, and that doesn't always have to be a negative, and it actually can be a positive. And so I think that's what I gleaned from it, is that don't be afraid, if you truly believe, to press on and try to make that point, even in where the paradigm would suggest differently.
Excellent.
I really truly believe through conflict you can grow. If everybody has the same point of view, that becomes a stale, very narrow-minded organization. I think if you have conflict, I'm not saying always negative conflict, but different points of view, conflict like that, your organization grows through that.
You know, if everybody always agrees on everything,
Yeah, what's the point?
Yeah. And then in fact, we've got 45 members in what we call our guiding coalition. And it's administrators and teachers and classified staff all working together. And they're all really progressive people. And so part of how we get new initiatives started is we take it through the guiding coalition. And then we'll vote, using the method fist to 5. Mm-hmm. We'll vote on things, and almost everything goes 5 for everybody. And we've had to actually set up a devil's advocate that actually has to try to poke holes in why we shouldn't do it. Can't afford it. People won't like it. It's not the way we've always done it. Or even more substantial reasons not to do it. Because groupthink is sometimes worse than anything else. Because you end up not thinking things through. So I think the video spoke about actually trying to surface conflict. Do any of you have any experience with that?
I was going to ask how you do that, because my leadership team seems to be, I don't know, maybe it's just my approach, but I'm like, tell me what I can do differently to make sure this point is, getting across. And every now and then they'll cross that bridge with me. I have one that'll do it one-on-one all the time, which is great because it helps me grow. But when we come together as a small leadership team, they seem a little bit timid. So I was wondering if any of you have some good strategies.
Well, I think it all comes down to trust, first of all. And if they feel like there's not going to be any retaliation for what they say, and that you honestly want feedback, and I tell people all the time, feedback is the breakfast of champions. We put together what we called a Coaches Leadership Academy. Did I tell you about the Coaches Leadership Academy?
I don't think so.
Right. Last week you mentioned it.
Okay, well, we put it together so that we had 7 full days of instruction with community college coaches and other really successful people coming in to work with our coaches, including like a sports psychologist. And part of how we got to that was we worked with a group out of Texas. And so I put this program together with feedback from the athletic directors and the coaches and the principals, and I felt really good about it. And I shared it with this guy from Texas. This guy from Texas had a lot of credibility with me. He'd been a head football coach in Texas for 28 years. He'd been to the state championship game 4 times, and he'd won it twice. Maybe as important, his son is Colt McCoy. So he knows some stuff. And so I showed him the 7 days of instruction I'd put together, and he said, "Would you like some feedback on that?" And I said, "Sure." I was pretty proud of what I put together, but it can always be better. And he said, "I think you don't have enough women involved providing instruction. It's too heavily focused on male coaches." And I looked at it and I said, "You know what? You're absolutely right." So if you're open to that kind of feedback, and who wouldn't be? Who doesn't want to get better? I mean, sure, it feels good to get feedback that says you're wonderful, but that doesn't make you better.
Right.
So if you can get some feedback and not be afraid of it and say, well, everybody can grow and get better, and you can ask for that, and they can feel good about doing it without fearing that you're going to come back and retaliate and short sheet their bed.
But if you put it out as a Google document for your agenda where people could add items that they wanted to discuss in your BLT meetings,
right,
give them an opportunity for input there, and then when that comes up, have them introduce what they want to talk about. You don't have to run the reins yourself.
Right.
Let them help lead the meeting.
Great point. Great point. That's excellent. So, in this era of collaboration and transparency, that's really, really important. All right, let's move on to Oh, the next item, the case law cases. Are you all, if we went one by one, just quickly, could you kind of give us the gist of your case law, your law case, and the implications for you as an aspiring superintendent?
I would love to do that. If I could go first? I got to leave here in a few minutes to do that induction ceremony and then come right back. But could I go first with mine?
Yes, please do.
Okay, I had the Board of Education versus Rowley. And it kind of involved some of the things that we had talked about in a different class. It involved a deaf student whose parents wanted her to have a sign language interpreter added to her IEP. The school had said that, she's meeting her goals, she's functioning as a normal student, she's actually being very successful, and they denied the addition of the sign language interpreter. So the parents then sued the school district for her, free and appropriate education. They felt like that was being violated. And the lower courts had even said that they weren't providing that. The district itself then went back, and there was some prior evidence that she used to, in previous grades, she had a sign language interpreter, and even the sign language interpreter and the teachers had noticed that when she had that person, that it was actually detrimental. She was looking to the teacher instead of that person wasn't being utilized. So then the upper level courts, after all this, had also agreed with the school that found that they were meeting the needs of her IEP. And we had talked about this in our special education class that, if a parent comes in and says, well, I think my kid can be more successful, that's not really the role of the IEP. The IEP is that they can function as a student. A lot of kids say, heck, I'd love to have my daughter. She doesn't have an IEP, but if you can read the test to her, she's going to do better. And that's really not what an IEP is for. It's to meet those basic needs for that student to be able to function in the school setting. And the court actually went back and reversed and found that the school district was not responsible to have that interpreter made available to that student.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the best.
Correct.
The highest quality program. It has to be enough.
Right.
So when you think about this particular case, in your mind, everybody, try to put together a multiple choice question that this would be the answer to. And what they're going to do on the test is they're going to have a scenario, and they're going to say, okay, so based upon this scenario, which law case is pertinent? And they'll list 4 of them. One of them will be this one. So as you begin to practice to get ready for the praxis, look at these law cases and begin to think, all right, what would that question look like? And that'll help you. Nicely done. I really appreciate that, man.
Thank you.
Who would like to go next?
Oh, I'll go next.
Okay, Russ.
I had, I'll go next because that's an easy act to follow. Just kidding.
Oh.
I had Lee versus Wiseman.
Right.
That's a case about school prayer. They had a rabbi lead a voluntary school prayer at graduation. Family wanted to do a stay. They went ahead and did the graduation. She attended. She did not stand for the prayer, but after that, they pursued the lawsuit, and they said that even though it was voluntary, that the separation of church and state still existed because at a graduation ceremony, it's really, it is voluntary, but it's really not. There's what they call the coercion test. You're there at the graduation, and it's a public event, and you're kind of being pressured indirectly to participate. So the lemon test, again, it wasn't met, and then they applied a coercion test to that. I think the implication for superintendents would be careful about these voluntary things that you say. Oh, it's voluntary. You can participate or not, because it may not meet the limit or the coercion test as you move along.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm going to go. If they need to sign me up for anything, let me know.
All right. Who wants to be next?
We're going to sign Matt up for everything.
I can go next.
Got hit by the bus.
Okay.
I'll go next. I'm the next one on the list with.
All right. Kenneth, go ahead.
Pickering versus Board of Ed, 1968. I broke it down to simple speech. It's freedom of speech by teachers as individuals. Teacher wrote a letter to the editor of the newspaper and then got fired for expressing what they felt about the school and the school board, and sued the school board, claiming that their First Amendment rights were violated. I think as a school leader, we should encourage subordinates to express their views, but they've got to do it with the understanding that they're speaking as an individual and not as a teacher. They can't use their school email. They need to use a personal email if they're going to send information out that way. But they do still have rights to speak. They just need to be careful of how they say it.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who would like to be next?
I'll go. I had New Jersey versus TLO, a pretty famous case in the 1985 or 84. And basically what it is about the ability to be able to search a student. And this was in New Jersey high school. They were searching a student's purse looking for cigarettes. And in that search, they came across some marijuana and a list of money owed. And through that, they charged her with possession of marijuana. It went through several courts, and the Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision, upheld the school ability to search, that it wasn't an illegal search. And through that, we now have a limited ability to search based on a reasonable suspicion. And I think the implication for us is for like student lockers, cars parked in our parking lot. Those are really we can search at any time because they're ours and it's our property. But when it's a student, for instance, a backpack, we have to have a reasonable suspicion that evidence will be found from what we believe is in that backpack on the content of the person. But it has to be a limited search. And I think it's been, at least in my experience, we use this case a lot when we have students that come forward with the saying that a student may have a weapon, a student has drugs. We'll use that as a reason to call a student in and say, hey, there's a good possibility we've heard that you might be carrying this. And so we can go through a limited search. What we have a problem is the police that we have, our SRO, they want us to do those work for them, and we have to be careful that we're not allowing the police to have us do their work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a pretty profound case that has really laid some groundwork in educational law for that ability to search students.
Okay, so the police have probable cause.
Right.
And school administrators have reasonable suspicion.
Right. With a credible source. You have to be able to, when you do that, the understanding is that you'll find evidence based on that reasonable suspicion.
Right. Right. Excellent work. Thank you. Who would like to be next?
I can go. Mine was actually one that we've just recently reviewed, and it was Lemon versus Kurtzman. And it was a decision in 1971. And this was interesting because I'll be listening for your opinion on what's happening right now with, let me look, I have to cheat. There's a House bill right now that is being proposed with, for lack of a better way to say it, some vouchers. And I feel like that's this Lemon and Kurtzman situation right here in current present time.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, with Lemon and Kurtzman, it was a case argued before the Supreme Court. And so what it was Pennsylvania's Non-Public Elementary and Secondary Education Act. They were saying it was unconstitutional because it violated the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. And so the act was allowing the superintendent of public schools to reimburse private schools for the salaries of teachers who taught in them. And it basically, the way I interpreted it, it was using public funds to pay salaries of individuals in a private setting, a religious setting, and I may not be Catholic, so I may not be happy that you're using my funds to pay for instruction that's happening in a Catholic school. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes.
And that's exactly what Governor Brownback and the legislatures are proposing now, that House Bill 2471, is it?
Uh-huh.
And where they're saying that if I have a student that lives in my neighborhood and they want to go to the local private school down the street, they're going to put 70% of, let's say it's $5,000 some odd dollars, they're going to take 70% of that, put it into an account, and let the parent use that money to pay the tuition to that private school. And so another taxpayer may say, well, wait a minute, I don't support that because it's not my religion, and you're using public dollars to pay for a religious education.
Yeah, I think with what the legislature is currently working on, there's a very good chance there'll be a court case.
That's what I was talking with Mr. Hall about that today, yeah.
I mean, I've posted on Facebook a number of times because I feel very strongly about this. If you want the glory of sending your kid to a private school, you get the glory of paying for it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just a sneaky way of giving rich people a tax break. Now, they'll pretend and say, oh, so it's for the underprivileged kids. They aren't going to accept any of those.
Yeah,
in fact, back in 2001, I had a meeting with the headmaster at Wichita Collegiate. And that's when Florida had their voucher bill. And I asked him if he would ever accept a voucher. And he said, well, I've got a waiting list of students who want to get into this school whose parents could actually pay. It cost, back then, it was just $10,000 a year. Now it's $15,000 a year to send your kid to Wichita Collegiate. He said, when you accept government money, you get government strings. Now, in this particular case, the state strings would be non-existent. They're going to give them a full waiver from testing and everything else the state controls. So it's not a level playing field. But he told me back then the highest he'd ever heard of a voucher was going to be $5,000. And he said, you're not going to be able to get an inner city kid here. I mean, they have to transport themselves to come here. And $5,000 is not the same as $13,000 or $10,000. It's just not going to happen, and I will never accept one. So what the purpose, they say, is that we want underprivileged children to get a chance to go to a high-quality school, and that's just baloney. That's a smokescreen. So, but watch carefully because, you know, the legislature, they've spent $50,000 hiring another attorney just to work on school finance legislation.
Mm-hmm.
So they keep the Attorney General busy morning and night, passing things they know are illegal. It's kind of silly. Thank you, Dina. Nice work. Who would like to go next?
I'll go next.
Oh, go ahead, Jessica.
All right. So my case was Bethel School District versus Fraser, 1983. And basically the question at hand was, does the First Amendment prevent a school district from disciplining a high school student for giving a lewd speech at a school assembly? And
Did you read the speech?
I read, yeah, I did. He was firm in his pants and blah, blah, blah.
By today's standards, I don't think anybody would even complain.
So there was a school rule in place that conduct which material or substantially interferes with the educational process is prohibited, including the use of obscene, profane language and gestures. The kiddo was suspended for 3 days and removed from the list of candidates to give the graduation speech. He went through a grievance process that the district had in place for discipline, but the hearing officer upheld the suspension, saying it met the ordinary meaning of obscene. And I couldn't find any clarification on this, but then it said he only served 2 days and was allowed to return on his 3rd day of suspension. So what happened, it went to court, and they sided with the kid at first, and then it went to the next one, and they finally came to a conclusion that in favor of the school district. And they said it was appropriate for the school to prohibit the use of vulgar and offensive language. Chief Justice Burke distinguished between political speech, which the court previously had protected in the Tinker versus Des Moines, and the supposed sexual content of Fraser's message at the assembly. Burke concluded that the First Amendment did not prohibit schools from prohibiting vulgar and lewd speech, since such discourse was inconsistent with the fundamental values of public education.
Okay, well done. That's perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, next contestant.
I think I'm it. Hey, Jessica, I have to ask, because this is my case, but did they give the kid a hearing before they suspended him, or her?
No, it didn't sound like it.
See, they violated something there.
Yeah.
My case was Goss versus Lopez, and it goes back to an Ohio case in 75, and 9 students allegedly vandalized school property. And what happened is that they just quickly suspended the kids, and they didn't allow due process. There wasn't a hearing involved. So it ended up going to the Supreme Court, and it only it was a 5-4 decision in favor of the students that there should have been a hearing. So one of the things that I used to do is run a behavior school, so I'm pretty well versed in hearings and suspensions and expulsion. I even did expulsion hearings for the district as needed. That's a neat job if you ever get a chance to do that. I tell you, you learn some laws. So what my takeaway is, make sure your principals know, if you're the superintendent, the importance of due process in a hearing. Even if the kid did it without question, they did it probably, but go ahead and talk to that student. I always like to have the student write a statement, and most of the time they incriminate themselves if they actually write a statement. So that was my takeaway. But it was a pretty easy case. I was surprised that they just suspended the kids, in this case for 10 days, without really even talking about it.
Yeah. And just essential for at least building principals to know, but also superintendents, in case something is appealed up the chain of command to the superintendent. I mean, it still pertains even at that level. Incidentally, we have an expulsion hearing officer who's a retired administrator from the Wichita Public School System, and we pay him $50 an hour to come in and do expulsion hearings. And that way we feel like, it's unbiased. He doesn't have a preconceived notion about the kid or the principal or anything. He just listens to the facts, looks at the law, and makes a decision. So if it's ever appealed in district court, I feel really good that we're on really safe ground.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, in many districts, one administrator will be the hearing officer for another administrator, and that's not quite as clean.
Well, and it's really hard when you're, isolated from everybody so far, and it's just me and my superintendent, and
yeah,
I'm dealing with something really tough, and I know he has to be my hearing officer, and I'm having to pick up the phone and talk to, somebody, a neighboring district, because I can't talk to him if I know it's probably going to go to a hearing.
Right.
Really awkward. Really
Very.
awkward.
Truly is. All right. Zeke, thank you. That was well done. Who's next?
I think I am. I don't know if anybody else is left. I had Title IX, and I think probably all of you are aware that that requires gender equity for boys and girls. I think we see that mostly in athletics. However, that's not all of that. Title IX was passed in 1972, and I would tell you that if you go to their website, because they have quite the website for Title IX, that's just kind of going on, talking about the continued struggle, especially for women and equity in lots of different places. It was really interesting to me that they have it kind of broken down into 10 key areas: access to higher education, career education, career employment, math and science, standardized testing, athletics, education for pregnant and parenting students, learning environment, sexual harassment, and technology. And while a lot of those things that I think we feel like we're pretty even on anymore, where girls have those access to technology, and we allow pregnant girls in our building, and we go out of our way to make sure daycare for kids who are parenting. But I was kind of laughing when you were thinking about a question for all of those, and mine would be, let's say you have your parents of a group of girls, a girls basketball team, who wants the girls game to be played at the 8 o'clock game on your Friday night, not necessarily always the boys. And if you were approached by that, what law might you have to consider when you think about that tradition of the boys varsity game always being the top game of the evening? So, yeah.
Good point.
Does anybody move their game, put the girls' game at 8 o'clock versus the boys?
I don't know of anybody.
Yeah.
Oh, it would be my ticket out the door.
We tried to shuffle some things with our junior high games, and the parents threw a fit. Their kid was supposed to be playing the B team game, and it is supposed to be at this time, and I can't get off work at that time. And it was a huge battle. It was just easier to go back to this is the way it's always been, and that's the way we're always going to do it.
I think one of the things we've dealt with was the pep band. There for a while was playing more of the boys varsity game than the girls varsity game. So we made sure that if they were going to play the entire boys game, that they'd play the entire girls, or they could play half and half, making sure that we had cheerleaders at both games, those kinds of things. So yeah, it really interesting, really interesting. And if you have a chance to visit their website, had no idea that it was so alive and well.
Yes, truly is.
That kind of came across my plate today. We were at our league meeting, and Keisha is changing some of the language in the rules for volleyball. And it really ties in with equality for everybody. They're saying the boys cannot play volleyball, but girls can still play football.
I thought the boys could play volleyball if both teams agreed, or at least at the JV level.
They're getting rid of that language totally. Keisha's going to go to a no standpoint. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and even under the old rule, if a guy played, you had to raise the net, and that's why no other opponent would ever agree to it, because you couldn't let a guy play at the current net height. You had to raise the net height, and that's why no one. I mean, even under the old policy, I never heard of anyone agreeing to it, because you're not going to have your girls having to jump 6 inches higher when you didn't have a guy and the other team did.
Actually in the Sunflower League, we had Lawrence High School had boys playing on the JV. Girls.
Wow.
Yeah, amazing.
Yes, first time I've heard of it.
Well, take a look at your minutes.
No. I
just got it in the mail. I'm going to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on there, and it's something that's been talked about I'm on the Acacia Board of Directors, so it's something.
Well, I am too, Joan. So I mean, I know it's on. I didn't mean I hadn't heard of that. I hadn't heard of a guy playing, and they said this.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah.
Okay, John, nice work. I appreciate it. Who do we have left?
I think I may be the lone rebel.
All right.
I had Hazelwood v. Kohlmeyer.
You've got a tricky one.
Yeah, that one came down to prior review and prior restraint, essentially, would be a good way to word that. Basically, a school newspaper had, the students had wanted to print an article, and the principal at the time had said that he was not going to allow the article to run in the paper. So he read it ahead of time and was denying it. Of course, they sued, and on a 5-3 vote, so it wasn't even a clear vote, but on a 5-3 vote, the Supreme Court actually stated that being that the newspaper was a regular classroom activity rather than a forum for public expression, that the school was allowed to deny that. If you actually dig into that and read the article, I think really the argument came around, it was really some shoddy reporters. I mean, they allowed, who they interviewed, they did not allow both sides to I guess, do their case or present their viewpoints in the article. So it stated there was allowed for prior review and prior restraint. If you dig a little deeper, though, in the state of Kansas, in 1991 and 92, the state legislature, passed the Student Publications Act in Kansas. So it actually, in a sense, returns things to more of the Tinker standard, which that law that was passed in 91-92, basically, there's still checks and balances that is allowed, but if you involve yourself in prior review and prior restraint, and things still get published, then the school's on the hook. They're the ones that's liable. It allows the administrator to remove libelous material and content promoting criminal conduct or writing that gets back to the lovely phrase, creates a substantial disruption of normal school activity. So that's what that Student Publications Act. Journalism advisors are also protected from termination or transfer for refusing to infringe upon a student's freedom of expression under the law. And students cannot be forced to delete a story from a newspaper or required to change a story because an administrator deems the subject controversial. That's the language in the Student Publications Act of 1992 in state statute. So really, if you haven't read that, that may be something good to Google and read. It's only a one-page document.
Okay, so for purposes of the Praxis, which is a national test, then you would want to focus on what the original decision was.
Yes, and that's
not what Kansas says.
Exactly.
And as a practical matter, if you are faced with a situation where you think a teacher might want to consider taking any action against a student publication, call your attorney first.
Absolutely.
It's tricky. You would think that federal law would trump state law. It's supposed to. It's called the Supremacy Clause. And yet, in this particular case, it doesn't work that way. For purposes of the test, you cannot censor. As a practical matter, when you're dealing in school, call your attorney.
And I didn't research it further, Dr. Burke, but at the time the law was passed, there was only 5 states that had anything comparable. So it may be more than that now, because that was clear back in 92. But at the time that Kansas passed that law, they were one of 5 states with anything comparable to that.
Nice work on a tricky case. I appreciate it. Anyone else left?
I may be the last one, Dr. Burke. I had, this is Randy. I had O'Connor versus Ortega.
All right, great.
It's a case around the Fourth Amendment. We have a psychiatrist and a physician worked for the state of California who was under investigation for some improprieties, was put on a paid leave of absence, and during that leave of absence, his bosses went in and searched his office, and in there they found some incriminating evidence which led to him losing his job. He sued, went through the Ninth Circuit Court to the Supreme Court, was kicked back. Ultimate, I think it was 5 years, 6 years to determine the case, but and the end result was that the courts found in favor of Ortega, and he was granted $700,000 from the state of California. I guess implications for us as school leaders is, as you said last session, is that if there's any doubt, or even if there's not a doubt on such a case, you may want to make that extra call and call your school attorney to find out what you can and cannot do. And that as a superintendent, you need to make sure that you're diligent in that you know what the law is and what your own school policies are, and if they're in alignment with that, if you have the right to search it. In this case, they searched his desk and his file cabinet, which he deemed as personal property, to find that incriminating evidence.
Okay, excellent job. Did anybody have the Tinker case? I guess not.
Well, Joe's not here tonight, so
yeah, Joe had it.
Yeah.
I think Joe had it. Okay.
And the Tinker case is on the test.
It is.
Right, you're not supposed to say that, Joan.
I could share that one a little bit because it tied in with mine.
Yeah.
I had the Pickering versus Board of Education, which was freedom of speech by teachers. But Tinker Des Moines was a year later, and it was freedom of speech by the students when a couple of kids were trying to wear armbands to protest the Vietnam War. And we're looking at trying to support the president with during the war. And as long as it's non-disruptive was what I got out of that one. Their freedom of speech cannot be disruptive to the education of the other student.
Yeah, the concept, I think, is substantial disruption.
Yep.
And what they deemed with the Tinker case was that the armbands, and keep in mind, how old were you guys back in like 68?
7.
Vietnam War was not real popular with a lot of people.
You're absolutely right. And I was in high school when this was going on, and there was a group of people who were anti-war, who were the Doves, and there were some pro-Vietnam War people, and they were the Hawks, and they couldn't stand each other. And so a lot of the administrators in schools were actually Hawks. And they didn't like these pacifists who were Doves. And so it got very, very political. But the bottom line in the Tinker case is that it was not a substantial disruption. And so they were allowed to actually wear the armbands. Now, you guys know, as being building principals, there are things that you can't say or wear. If you hear or see these things, disciplinary action will follow you. And you know what a substantial disruption is when you define it. But it's not everything, and it's not just because you don't like it. But as Joan said, it might be on the test.
Yeah.
Well, and the main thing that I always remember hearing about Tinker Des Moines was the justice that wrote the majority opinion. That's where the phrase that students and teachers do not shed their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse gate came from.
That's correct.
That's one thing that I always remember when I hear that case.
Yeah. Thank you for stepping up on that. I appreciate that too.
That would be very great information to remember, wouldn't it, Joan?
It would be. It would be.
Any other memories, Joan?
Wait a minute now.
Wink, nudge, nudge.
Let's discuss standard 5 for a moment.
Yeah. We probably don't want to ask them to do the unethical thing.
That's exactly right. All right, let me get back to our outline. That's not the guy yet. All right, got that part done. Okay, so you all know what your assignments are for next week. And so the next 2 case studies, and make sure you do your discussion for them. Be thorough on those as well. You guys are doing a great job with those. And we're up to a point where we're to the launch. You guys ready for the launch?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to take a minute to talk about something that all teachers need. And if you don't have in your life, you need to get you some pudding. Pudding are little cups of blessings that you can have in your desk and make your day so much easier. If you're having a rough day, pull out some pudding. If one of your colleagues is angry about something, give her a pudding. If you got a long staff meeting ahead of you, spread some blessings. Pudding will make your life so much easier as a teacher. Go get you some.
You have to send us this.
Yes, please.
You guys, it's a whole series of things.
Oh, that's great.
This guy's got a whole bunch of little clips he's put out. I'll send you the link to that.
Oh my goodness.
And people are. I've had people use these in very difficult faculty meetings. It just sort of clears the air.
Wow.
He's an actual principal, if I recall correctly, right?
Yes, he's in Lexington, Kentucky. He's a principal.
That is hilarious.
All right. Any questions? Okay. Any questions before we go? Okay. I promised you a short class. I deliver. Thank you. I appreciate all you've done, and we'll see you next week.
Have a good evening and a good meal.
Have fun in Boston.
All right.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.